Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm actually not Cass Sunstein. I'm the star of Glee. And I have a song for you that hasn't been on TV yet. It's going to be next season. You're looking really scared. Okay, we'll pass on the song. The remarks I'm going to give have a word in them that's been statistically proven to put people to sleep and annoyance. It's the word heuristic. So sorry, cousins. Since you're cousins, you know the word heuristic. It doesn't bother you. You're related to me. It's okay? All right. Here's some recent social science. It's the only slide that's going to be recent social science. Human beings use mental shortcuts or heuristics to make assessments. Are you with me so far? That means that if you're thinking, for example, what you think about some political issue that's complicated, you don't study it, you might ask, what does someone I trust think about it? That's a heuristic. Got it? So they're sensible to use, but they can go wrong. There's a heuristic called the availability heuristic, and the question is it frightening to think about crime, or is it frightening to think about some risk of cancer? You might think, do you know someone who suffered an incident of crime in your neighborhood? Do you know someone who's been hit by cancer in the recent past? That can drive your judgments about how likely it is. There was a time not long ago that in New York City, people were really frightened of Ebola. You remember that? That was at a time when more Americans had married Kardashians than had died of Ebola. And the reason the fear was proliferating, the Kardashians, by the way, I haven't married them, but several of my cousins have. So the heuristic worked because people had in their minds examples of Ebola, and that drove their probability judgments up. If you think, should I vote for a particular candidate, you might think, do I like them? And while that's not the worst thing to ask, asking whether you like them isn't the best thing to ask when you're thinking whether they'd be a good senator or governor or president. So that's social science. That's all the social science you're going to get, unless you beg. Okay, here's the family heuristic. If you have someone who's in your family, and AJ, as noted, is a pretty close family member of mine, and I'm going to talk about my dad pretty soon. Okay, and it's not going to be like really personal, dull stuff about the things he did when I was 2. It's a little more general interest. So if someone's in your family, you feel a commonality with them, you want to protect them, you side with them, you probably give them the benefit of the doubt, and you'll be willing to sacrifice for them. You might be willing to go to war on their behalf. Yes? I'm seeing my cousin Ellen, first cousin Ellen in the room. I would go to war for her. I've known her since I was a little boy. And that's how cousins feel about each other, even if they don't see each other all the time. Yes? That's family. Okay, by family we ordinarily mean parents, children, siblings, immediate family. We probably also mean close cousins, Ellen, my close cousin right there, and very possibly those who are closely related to people who are clearly family. They're sons and daughters. AJ is Ellen's son. He's my close family. Okay, but with modern information gathering capacities, that 16 doesn't mean he's 16 degrees away from being my family member, though that's possible. That's Abraham Lincoln, by the way. Do you notice a resemblance? He has more hair there, probably there also. That's my cousin. That's Lady Gaga. She's my cousin, probably yours also. She's related, we know that. Not that close, but she's related. She's a cousin. And of course, Frank Sinatra, cousin. Are you amazed? Or is that by this time completely obvious? And there I am with my cousin by marriage, Mia Farrow. I didn't know at the time that we were cousins, but so be it. Okay, here's the inside story. I think this is what AJ's doing. When we think family, we connect ourselves with a relatively small set of people with whom we feel particular kinship, people we've known kind of all the time. It turns out that the set of connections is really big, and we can identify them. Notice the earlier slides, and I could have gone on and on. Glenn Beck, who's called me the most dangerous man in America dozens of times, he's my cousin. welcome to the family, Glenn. That means that our feelings of closeness and commonality, that sense that we'd protect people, sacrifice them, go to war for them, that maybe gets attached to a lot of people. Yes? That's what this day is in a way about. That means, in a way, that the family heuristic, like the availability heuristic, goes wrong, in the sense that we are attaching feelings of closeness and proximity to people who aren't that close and that proximate, but whom we can see connections with by virtue of the miracle of modern genealogical techniques. So that's a view. But, and that word but, which I'm going to raise now, should be in bigger letters than it is. So I'm suggesting there's a heuristic. We love our family members. We'll connect with them. We'll do things for them. We'll maybe lay down our lives for them. That's not true, really, in kind of the head of Lady Gaga and Abraham Lincoln, as much as I admire them both. But there's a but. And so the rest of these remarks are going to be about the but. Here's a real letter. This is not made up. From April 15th, 1945. I discovered it fairly recently in a little blue box I have at home, which are the things that my mother gave me that were from my dad when my dad died. And the letter says on it, I want you to have these things. This was right after my dad died, with a tear, mother. And she didn't cry very often, so with a tear was capturing some very intense emotions. Relatively recently, it's kind of hard to go through one's parents, deceased parents' most precious things. So I hadn't done it, and it's not recent that I got this blue box. I did it pretty recent. Here's a letter I got from 1945. Dear family, conference starts today, and the town is going wild with excitement. I have to tell you the town. It says San Francisco. The Hamilton Hotel, San Francisco. It is a pleasure to be here for the opening few days. Russians came by the hundreds, as did French, and all the countries. Let's pray that they accomplish something. Now imagine that's your dad who's deceased. You got this letter from 1945. What's going on there? What's that letter about? My dad fought in World War II. He fought in the Philippines. He was on some sort of furlough in the midst of the war. The letter goes on to say, by the way, we're going to do fine in Europe. Japan is really hard, and I'm probably going to have to go in. In fact, it's a little implicit, I'm definitely going to have to go in. So that's what this is about. The war in Europe looks about over and will probably end, as I said, sometime this summer. So I'm telling you something happening in real time. This is living history by someone who was in the middle of it. Don't worry if you don't hear from me to 6 to 10 weeks. Remember that I'm going 9,000 plus 3,000 miles. I had no idea. He's going into Japan. And a total of about 12,000 miles from home, and that you can't cover those distance every couple of hours. Now, the next sentence is a heartbreaker, and I'm hoping that you'll see exactly why. Please don't alarm Marion, that's my mother, by calling her to find out if she has heard from me. Now, probably you all know someone in your family who, if a spouse is at risk, and if someone in the family says, have you heard from them? That person is going to think, oh my God, I haven't. They might not be with us anymore. So my dad's protecting my mother right there, saying to his family, including Ellen's beloved mother, saying, don't call the wife. She might be alarmed. You will both get opportunities at first opportunity. Love, Dick. That's my dad. Those are his grandchildren right now. Many years later, 70 years later, who would have thought? Declan and Rian. That's his daughter, who's in the room, who's the representative of the United States to the United Nations, the ambassador. Now let's go back, if we can, to this letter. Conference starts today, and the town is going wild with excitement. It's a pleasure to be here. Russians came by the hundreds, as did French. Let's pray that they accomplish something. My dad was in San Francisco on the very day that the United Nations was maybe getting organized. He was there that very day. He never got to meet his grandchildren or his daughter-in-law, but that's where she is. That's the UN Security Council, whose job it is to protect security internationally. And that's the organization that he helped fight for in World War II, and that the prayers worked a little bit at least. Okay, here's his hero, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I'm not sure how many of you know your genealogical connection to FDR, but surely at least one of you is raising your hand. Hats off to you. There's a great speech by FDR, which was in the midst of World War II, actually, when he's saying, in future days, which we seek to make secure, we look forward to a world founded upon 4 essential freedoms: freedom of expression, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. Now, to invoke those 4 freedoms as organizing principles for the United States, that's very ambitious, big stuff for a president of the United States to do. But there's something in there, the Prince a little small, that I want to highlight that's much more ambitious. And that's the use of the words everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world. The World War II generation, was symbolized by its greatest leader, Roosevelt, is insisting, against the advice of his advisors, that we should think about these freedoms not just for ourselves and the people who are our fellow citizens, but for everyone in the world. And the hammer in these remarks, I think, are the last 4 words: freedom from fear anywhere in the world. Those came to Roosevelt personally. His advisors said, you can't say that, Mr. President. That's not feasible or politically wise. President of the United States in World War II insisted on it. Okay, here's the State of the Union Address 2015. In West Africa, our troops, our scientists, our doctors, our nurses, our healthcare workers are rolling back Ebola. And notice that's at a time where Ebola is killing a lot of people in places that are very far from our shores and creating the opposite of freedom from fear, subjection to fear on the part of numerous people who don't live in the United States, saving countless lives and stopping the spread of the disease. But the job is not yet done, and the world needs to use this lesson to build a more effective global network to prevent the spread of future pandemics, invest in smart development, and eradicate extreme poverty. They're picking up on Roosevelt's claim about freedom from want. It's words you may remember from the 2015 State of the Union Address. Here's a moment not long after. It's the president and his daughter-in-law representing the organization at whose creation he was present. So the conclusion is there is a family heuristic. It's what this day and AJ are exploiting. It suggests proximity, commonality, and a duty of protection. Think of FDR and think of my dad fighting in the Philippines, with whose citizens, by the way, he became lifelong friends. He was probably related to them, but he didn't know that. It works, the family heuristic, by extrapolating from the context of close proximity, cousins, to contexts of great distance. Think of Lincoln, Lady Gaga, and that singer, Sinatra, where the original reason for feelings of family probably don't quite apply. The distance is a little too big for that. So that's the question that would challenge the use of the family heuristic. But, and there's that word again, that's the most important word in these remarks. But it might be, for you all, my cousins, that the family heuristic, seen in light of Roosevelt's remarks, in light of the sacrifices of many generations of Americans, in light of the 2015 State of the Union Address, in view of worldwide efforts supported by Americans to protect people who in some very deep sense they see as their cousins, it might not go wrong, the family heuristic. It might go very, very right. Thanks.